The next prisoner, Gamorrean guard.
Gladly, Jabba the Hutt.
C-3PO, Gamorrean Guard, and Jabba the Hutt place at each sold separately.
And waiting beneath the Millennium Falcon, Jabba the Hutt, as Han Solo bargained for your life with this vile gangster.
This thing rules. The thing rules.
Oh, hey, what's up? I'm Brian Altano.
And I'm Max Scoville.
This is a show where we discuss something we love,
Unpack why we love it,
explain where it came from,
try to remember our first impressions of it,
share our weird stories about it.
maybe learn something new about it along the way.
But first and foremost, we're here to celebrate the fact that this thing rules. Okay, I'll say it. I mean, Jabba the Hutt doesn't rule, right? Like he's bad.
He's
Right?
a bad guy.
Yeah,
But he's like the best bad guy.
He's a great. Oh, yes. Okay, so let's separate not the art from the artist. I guess the character, the creation, the idea, the concept, the toys, all that fun stuff. As an actual thing that performs actions in the world that he's in. Not great. Not a good guy by any means.
No,
right?
he's an immensely problematic character.
Yes, pretty bad across the board.
But he's also a big slug, which is funny.
Yeah, and it's fun, we're tap dancing on the Rancor pit here basically, but which is not a good place to be. Let's get the bad stuff out of the way real quick.
He feeds women to a dinosaur that lives in his basement.
Yes, he does. He does that. He kidnaps them, forces them to wear stuff that they probably wouldn't ever wear on their own if they were deciding to. He's a drug dealer.
Yeah,
which is a criminal.
crime
gets
lord in
people
general.
killed.
Yeah,
he takes people and just puts them in a stone obelisk on his wall. Lot of bad stuff.
he's got a dungeon. Like
He's
I
got
feel
a
like
dungeon.
if you have a dungeon, you're probably a bad person unless it's like a kink thing. But I don't think it is for him. I think it's more of a villain thing.
It might be both. I don't know if he ever goes down there really. But Jabba the Hutt rules as a character, as a design, as a creature, as a monster. And you and I, we've always been pretty vocal about gravitating towards some of like the weirdest parts of Star Wars, more specifically than, a lot of people are like, I like the clone troopers and like when the ships shoot each other and the lightsaber fights, the wizards that do sword battles. And we're always just like, there's a monster that has 4 arms and he's got like, we latch onto the weirdest parts of those things. And a lot of it is because I think we probably grew up in hovering around a bunch of Jim Henson Creature Workshop nonsense that was just sort of fluttering in and out of every show we were watching, movies we were watching. And so like seeing Jabba the Hutt for the first time as a kid was amazing to me because that was, first of all, Return of the Jedi was my first Star Wars movie. Second of all, the first 20-something minutes of that movie are basically a self-contained heist film. And I don't think you need to know a lot about Star Wars going in to understand that, like, a bunch of characters who are good, some are in disguise, arrive at this, Kingpin's mansion that's just massive in the middle of the desert. And things seem to be going pretty horrible from top to bottom. But then a whole bunch of stuff happens and there's triumph and the rest of the movie goes on. And so my first introduction to Jabba the Hutt was just like wonder and fear and amusement in equal doses, right? You are just bombarded with this huge, grotesque, slimy, repugnant creature with this incredible deep voice. The yellow font would pop up on the old VHS for his subtitles. He was drooling and smacking his tongue around. He had this little rat dog next to him. And I was just like, this guy is funny as hell and also disgusting. But wow, what a cool creature.
He's funny and scary at the same time.
Yes.
And like, I mean, in the context of the film, like he's an interesting character. Because, even if you had seen the previous movies, like assuming you're not watching the special editions, they just talk about Jabba a whole lot. It's like Greedo shows up in A New Hope and he's, hey, you owe Jabba $40,000 or whatever. And then when you never actually know what he's supposed to look like. No one knew what he was going to look like going in. And then you see him and he's like, if Scarface was the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. Like, what? Like, that is such a bizarre thing. And, like, I imagine that there were probably art books that were published before Return of the Jedi that had some concept art for Jabba in them, but maybe not. I don't even know, how that stuff came around. But the whole thing was like Lucas wanted to put him in the special edition originally, and they shot all that footage with that Scottish guy who's just like a regular man. And the plan was to like rotoscope in a stop motion creature, which would have looked terrible had they gone through with that. That would have been
original New Hope.
In the original New Hope, yeah. And then they wound up doing it with CG, which looked weird. I don't know. I was fascinated by it because they hyped up Jabba in A New Hope so much when I was at peak Star Wars fandom. And like, honestly, the big CGI dance number in Return of the Jedi, like I get people's complaints with that. It's kind of corny, but like adding Jabba, like adding a whole bonus scene that has Jabba in it and like has Han Solo like arguing with him, and like, just the fact that you're like, oh shit, there's more of this galaxy like to show up that was such a cool thing that, throw in there.
I don't know if we like really had anything like that at the time, because that was, I think, like probably before around like the DVD extras thing was so ubiquitous, and like, there were sometimes like there would be like a VHS with deleted scenes or whatever, and we didn't really get video game DLC, or maybe you would get an album with bonus songs. But to have a scene that was originally shot in the 70s dropped back in with modern CG, which admittedly was a little wonky, right? Like there's the Han Solo, that whole scene revolves around Han Solo just like kind of like circling him and shit talking, and he steps on his tail, and he just does this thing where they just like pop him into the air, and it doesn't. Your brain is telling you the entire time, well, that doesn't work. But also you're like, I'm seeing Star Wars in a movie theater for the first time. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't care. This is exciting.
Also, the thing I really love is that was also, in a weird sense, that was kind of a prequel to Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi. Because he's sprightly. Like, he's like walking around, or whatever you call what a slug's slithering around. He's, he's in Mos Eisley. Like, he's out for the day. He's out doing stuff. And then, Return of the Jedi, he's just like working from home. Like, he just sits on his dais all day and does, smokes weed and eats frogs and stuff.
You would think, like, to me growing up, I thought Return of the Jedi was like one of those guys they would have to call the firemen in to help, if they were sick. Like, they'd have to knock down walls and stuff like that. I didn't picture him. Yeah, I didn't picture him going anywhere, right? Like, I thought he was like, Brendan Fraser in The Whale or whatever. But he's out and about, and like, occasionally in Star Wars stuff afterwards, they've shown Hutts on, these sort of like floating, like the big, the kind of the things you get when you're at Costco or whatever, right?
Yeah.
like a pallet basically that floats.
Like a forklift car.
A forklift, yeah, which is very funny. But like, it's so funny now being a grown-up Star Wars fan and understanding the original Star Wars trilogy and how important it was. And then like getting older and learning the backlash to Return of the Jedi, a lot of it being based around, Viet Cong teddy bears that kill stormtroopers and stuff like that. And there's a lot of silly stuff in there for kids. But if you think about going from A New Hope, where Darth Vader is this incredible presence and he's running the Death Star and they're teasing the Emperor, and then in the next one, like you meet the Emperor and Darth Vader cuts off his son's hand. It's one of the most dramatic reveals in movie history. And then they're like, how are you going to follow it up with the next film? It's just like, what about a frog? What about a huge boiled frog?
I guess I can see how that would be a bit of a jump,
Sure.
Like I don't know. I had no frame of reference, like what it was like to go see Return of the Jedi in theaters. I think it was my first one too. And like, I don't know, there's the part where like 3PO is like, R2, you're playing the wrong message. And I like didn't get it. And I thought like, oh, what's the right message? Like what it was, like I didn't know that they're just like, I don't know. Like,
it was so cool. And so like, I think that like, both of us, as we've gotten older, we've, read books and watched documentaries and done all this, research on like how these creatures came together. A lot of it was, Phil Tippett and a bunch of other guys who were basically like, hey, George Lucas would come in and just be like, make me a whole, room full of monsters, and they'd pitch all this stuff. And Jabba the Hutt was eventually born. And the anecdote that you and I have always shared is that there's like 5 guys in there. There's like 5 human men.
Not the hamburgers. There's like literal men inside there.
There's probably
some 5 guys in there too.
But yeah, there's to actually puppeteer Jabba the Hutt. There are people under him, there are people in him, behind him, there are people operating the tail and the mouth and his little hands, and he eats frogs out of a bong. Like there's just literally a lot of moving parts there.
There's a lot going on there.
Yeah, and that's always been so funny to me.
We were talking about this. You gave my daughter a Jabba the Hutt toy, like a Black Series 6-inch scale,
like a good uncle
figure.
would.
It's like it's like the size of a watermelon. Like it's a pretty big toy. It's like a 13-inch long like plastic green croissant, and I'm just like, she was just like mine. She was just like obsessed with it. She's super stoked on it. I'd shown her Jedi, and I was like, thought she's gonna be scared shitless by the Rancor, and I thought maybe Jabba would scare her, and I thought, there's a lot of stuff in there you can be scared of. Right. But the thing that's funny is that since she was an infant, I gave her like a bunch of my random Star Wars figures, so she was more excited to see Yak Face and Cy Snoodles than she was to see like Luke or Darth Vader or anybody. Like she knows Darth Vader from a limited edition hot sauce bottle that has a Darth Vader helmet for a cap.
Right.
And so he showed up and she goes, "It's the guy from the hot sauce." And I was like, and then, yeah.
Kind of. I mean, that's kind of what Mustafar is.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. And then, I don't know. And then Yak Face, it took me years to even find Yak Face because he's like in the sides of shot. And like, I'm good at picking out aliens, but he shows up very briefly in a few scenes. Like there's a couple Jabba's Palace denizens that I like had toys of, I had trading cards of, I knew who they were. And I didn't even like there's the little seashell that lives on the wall. I forget what that thing's called. There's like a clam that lives there for some reason. And then there's Hermie Odal, who's like fucking terrifying looking, and he's just this big ass. He hangs out with like Effant Mon or whatever, who looks like an elephant. You can see why.
Effant Mon and Hermie Odal are like two of the weirdest creatures in any movie ever, and they're just one of like 16 background characters. Like, I believe that movie broke the record for puppets at the time.
Yeah,
like that was the most amount.
Like everyone gives Lucas shit for putting too much CG in things, and obviously there's like amazing achievements in motion control camera technology, doing stop motion stuff, the stuff with miniatures, but the sheer magnitude of what's happening with puppeteering in Jabba's palace.
Oh man, yeah.
And like Star Wars has always been a tech demo. Like it has always been like the stuff that Lucas is doing is always simultaneously telling this like elaborate fairy tale, but also pioneering the way people make movies and doing crazy stuff to really push things in new directions. And I have no idea what the point of Jabba the Hutt was in that context. It honestly feels more like a college dare than an achievement in filmmaking. And I'm not denying that it's an achievement in filmmaking, but they literally, again, they got 5 dudes in there and they have them all operating at like the way. Let's see if we can describe this. The way Jabba works is there are 2 guys in his torso.
Yeah.
And they're sitting in there like they're driving a car, and each one of them is holding their arm out the window. And that's how his arms work. And so one guy has, let's see, the guy who's, I guess, riding shotgun is, I think he works Jabba's tongue. I'm not sure. One of them works the tongue, one of them works the eyes, one of them works the head. Or basically they're, one arm is being used for an arm, and the other arm is being used for half a face. And they're doing that. And then there's another guy who's down below who's holding onto this weird stick that looks like an oar, and he's the one who works the tail. And he's wiggling this thing around and like flapping it around. And then there's another guy whose job it is to just blow smoke. Yeah. And he's literally down there with a like a piece of surgical tubing and a cigar, and he's just like, whenever Jabba has to blow smoke, he goes poof, and it like goes up, and he's just like, there's a documentary where he's just like, if I had a glass of cognac, this would be the best job in the world. It's like,
it's like,
what did
you lay underneath 5 puppeteers, get high.
Yeah, it's just, but I showed Jedi to my daughter, and my whole thing is like, if something scares her, I want to explain how it works. Like I want to show it to her, and like I thought she'd be scared of the Rancor. She didn't really. I don't know. She's kind of whatever about it. But I showed her some making of stuff there, and that's easier to like make sense of. Like you sort of see, that looks like that's a little version, and then they make it big, or like, there's somebody holding his giant hand around Luke, and it's like, that's a prop that they used, and it's all trick photography. Jabba the Hutt, they really don't have a lot of footage of. I mean, it's hard to show the footage of people inside him. Yeah, they show. Basically, it's like dudes in a submarine. Like there's shots of them kind of like in there. They're sort of like, it looks like it looks like they're physically behind the scenes because they're underneath something. And I don't think she understood that. I don't think she fully grasped like how that works. I'm just showing her a video of a guy smoking a cigar, and I'm like, that's Jabba the Hutt, and it's like, how?
Like you said though, because it's like, but why? She's probably like, but why would they do that? Like, why would they all go in there?
And we still don't know.
No, we don't know. And it feels like. Do you remember when you were a kid and you were watching Sesame Street and you're like, all right, I get the show. There's humans, and then there's puppets, and then all of a sudden that monster guy would come out, and you'd be like, that's a man in a costume. That's not a puppet. Like that's a full. That's just a full man wearing like same thing with like a. Not Snuffleupagus, but like the Muppets had this a lot, right? Like where you'd be like, there's humans and there's puppets, and then every now and then there's just a guy in a costume, and you're like, it doesn't
weird.
make any sense to me.
It's weird.
So I feel like with Jabba the Hutt, they were like, what if there were 5 guys inside of that monster from the Muppets? Like, what if we just shoved as many men in there as possible, made them go to town, and then made him represent this like awful, disgusting creature? But what I love about him about all that is that you don't ever. There are like certain angles on Jabba the Hutt you just never see in the movies. And you and me were at Star Wars Celebration in like 2015 in Anaheim, and they had this like. I don't know if it was official or some fan just dragged it in there, but they had a Jabba the Hutt. And outside of like the toys you got, I'd never seen a life-size Jabba the Hutt in person. And we went around and we looked at his ass and we were like, look at his weird fucking ass. Like, he's got this, what a weird butt this big thing has. Like, it's just, it was like, of course he does, because he lives on a concrete bed. But
Yeah, he's got like suckers underneath. Like he's got like little.
Yeah, they're like the little suction cups or whatever.
My daughter asked my wife like what she's like, what are those? And my wife was just like, I don't know. I don't know. Ask your father. Ask him about this shit. I don't. Who cares? Why? It's tentacles.
So Return of the Jedi was my first Star Wars movie. Dengar was my first Star Wars toy. My Star Wars experience was secondhand through an older neighbor. I was the oldest of 3. I have 2 younger brothers, and so I had to sort of be the one that hunter-gatherer in terms of pop culture nonsense, and had to sort of disseminate that information to my brothers and friends and stuff like that. So I had an older neighbor friend who was like 2 or 3 years older than me, and he got into all that stuff and then got out of that stuff. And I didn't really understand it at the time, but having watched my kid grow up, where there's like 6 months where she's like, I love Frozen, Elsa, Anna, Olaf. And I'm like, I can't wait for this to go away. And then it just goes away one day. And she's like, I don't want this anymore. And she's like, I want Wolverine in my bedroom and not Elsa. And I'm like, yeah. He just got over Star Wars one day and he gave me a bunch of his toys. And the first one he gave me was Dengar, who's obviously a bounty hunter on a screen in half a second in Empire Strikes Back. Obviously, everyone knows that. Tip of the tongue. But eventually I went to his house and he had Jabba the Hutt. And the Jabba the Hutt he had comes with the, I believe they call it like a dais, right?
Yeah.
It's his big bed. And the thing that didn't make any sense was on the toy, there was a trap door, but it was under where Jabba would sit. So you would pick him up, you would turn these little knobs in the front, these, the little sort of like, they're little heads with the thing in the nose or whatever. They look like little cyclops or whatever.
Towel racks.
Yeah, towel racks. And you would pick him up, and then you would pick up the actual bed would open up and would reveal a pit. But the pit was only like an inch deep. But what was cool about it was there were skeletons. There are skeletons in there. That toy has skeletons. And his was so old that it also had like a dead molten centipede. Like there was dust in there. Like there was an actual insect in there that was dead for so long it was like hard. And I opened it up and it was just like, whoa, gross. Like, and I was just thinking like, man, he's got so much nasty stuff down there. So I got to see that before I saw the Rancor pit and all that. Before I saw the actual movie, I got a peek into this thing. So I knew that he had rotten garbage under his ass.
Dude, same. I actually, very similar Jabba the Hutt origin story for me. I was like at a dinner party at one of my mom's friend's house, and she had grown-up kids who'd gone off to college, and they were just like, yeah, go mess with their stuff, go dig through their toys. And there was this like just mosh pit of mixed and matched action figures, and Jabba was in there, and I just remember being like, a little scared, opening up that little door, which again is like canonically, don't think it's canon. I don't think he's got a secret stash in there, but if he did, he'd probably have like crate dragon rubies in there, or maybe like a bunch of spice, or maybe just some like nudie magazines, like it's like when dudes hide stuff under their mattress, you're like, oh, that's where I keep my pot or whatever. Like that's just such a funny thing. But like the fact that there'd be like a skeleton in there I mean, that is like that'd be a pretty awful way to die, just be getting sat on by Jabba the Hutt. Which
Yeah, I never thought about that as being sort of like one of those like IKEA coffee table storage units or whatever, or like the bed that has the pull out drawer underneath. But yeah, I guess the way that translated to the toy was like that, which was pretty funny. And I bought I was at Star Wars Celebration Chicago in 2019, I guess, and I saw a complete. It had everything but the actual box. 1981, I guess. Jabba the Hutt, the Kenner action figure. 83, yeah. And I had. I know I had the original figure at some point that I accumulated over the years, but I didn't have his dais and the bong and all that stuff. And so I picked it up, and what was cool about it was it also came with the instruction manual. And like very few Kenner toys, basically anything that was sort of playset shaped, came with an instruction manual. And what's weird is the art on the instruction manual. So the dais also comes with this little string, which is connected to a choker that you're supposed to put on somebody. But on the art, they put it on a drawing of C-3PO. And it doesn't make any sense because he doesn't do that in the movie. Like C-3PO is like there in the movie, and like R2-D2 becomes a bar for him, right? Which is another great reason to love Jabba the Hutt. He turns R2-D2 into Bar 2-D2. But yeah, so in this drawing, they put this choker around him. And it says, like, there's this thing in the corner is like, if there's any problems with this toy, you give this number a call. It's all good. We'll take care of you. And my weird ass, my dumb, stupid ass that like my kid had to grow up with as a dad, it decided to get that framed. And for some odd reason, when we bought a house, I convinced my wife that we should put it in our downstairs bathroom. So our downstairs bathroom, like, and I didn't put any other art in there. There's just a framed instruction manual from the 1983 Kenner Jabba the Hutt. And then you walk out into our living room, and you had gotten me in probably like 2016 this Jabba the Hutt mug. It's one of the most revolting looking like pieces of drinkware a human being can possibly own, because it literally just looks like this weird sculpted Jabba the Hutt, but you can hold his tail like a handle. I tried to drink a beer out of it once, and it's got all these weird pockets in it, so it does that thing where you drink out of like a beer boot and it kicks a splash back up into your face. It's like oh, it vomits up in your face. So I have that there, and then underneath that I have another Jabba the Hutt statue next to his house. That was part of this. I don't think it was Hallmark, but it was like this company that does like Bradford Exchange, I think they're called. They do a bunch of like weird like holiday ceramic crap, and they decided to do Star Wars stuff at one point. So like when you and I were talking about doing this episode, I was like, yeah, it'll be fun to talk about Jabba the Hutt. And then I looked around and I was like, wait a minute. There's like 3 Jabba the Hutts in my living room. One you can drink out of. There's one framed in my downstairs bathroom. There's one on a big Star Wars trilogy picture framed in my garage. There's another framed upstairs. And then I walked into my office, my studio, where I do my shooting, and I'm like, oh, I've got 9 Jabba the Hutts in here. Most recently, I got one that was a Disneyland exclusive popcorn bucket that comes with like a whole, because popcorn buckets are a big thing now, obviously. But at Disneyland specifically, they sell them, and you can only buy them there, different than the ones you get in movies. And this one, when you open it up, it laughs for like a full 2 minutes.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so yeah, when your kid comes over, I'm going to show it to her.
Oh my God.
And it's got a little strap on it, so you could wear it like a purse. And on the strap is Jabba the Hutt's best friend sidekick, Salacious Crumb, the little rat dog. I have a Build-A-Figure Jabba the Hutt that I got in Japan from this company Kubrick, that basically I had to piece together arm and leg and head and dais together. I kept going back into this same toy store like 5 times on a trip with my wife, and because I just went in there, bought some toys, walked out, and she was like, okay, that was fun, right? And I was like, oh, I got Jabba the Hutt's arm, I better go back and get the rest of the set. And I went back in there, and then I was like, oh, they also have a Build-A-Fig for the ATST. And like by the like day 3 or 4, she was like, stop going in this fucking store. Like, I love you. We're on vacation. Can we literally do anything else? I'm like, I have to collect more pieces of the Jabba the Hutt. See,
That is
I
so
love
funny.
and so there's a guy we both follow on Instagram called what's his name? Mighty Jabba's Lair or Mighty Jabba's
Mighty Jabba's collection. Let's see.
Mighty Jabba's collection. And he has, I thought I was weird with like having 10 or 12 of these things. This guy is astounding, and he is so like locked in on every single type of Jabba ever. He loves the character. He collects pretty much every iteration of Jabba ever made.
Everything.
Everything.
He was the other day they had Star Wars Oreos, and he found a Jabba one, and he, much like Jabba does with Han Solo, he decided he was going to freeze it in carbonite, or rather in clear resin. So he's got this like, plastic lucite looking hockey puck that's just got an Oreo stuck inside it, which is such a funny thing to do. But like that's one way to preserve
like, how do you collect this? And
Yeah.
so what's funny is like when you and I shared a desk at IGN, you had a Boba Fett collection. And the thing about Boba Fett is that he's mostly just a man that can stand up straight. So like collecting those is sort of like collecting nutcrackers. And you literally did, I think I got you a Boba Fett nutcracker at one point. But so it makes sense because they can all stand up next to each other. They got this like great, there's some small ones, some big ones.
You can
Jabba
pose
the
it.
Hutt, it is just not like, it's just like collecting footballs. Like where are you going to put them?
I mean, some of them you can stack if they're like plushies or whatever, but it's such a ridiculous shape. It's like a large comma.
Yeah.
Like just
Yeah, and it's what's weird is like, aside from the fact that everything he does is terrible and he's an awful person or character in terms of behavior, they also associate him with a lot of like fun, silly stuff. Like he gets roped into a lot of like tiki stuff, or anytime there's like drinking involved, like alcohol involved. They're like, well, there's Mos Eisley Cantina, that's a place where alcoholics and dangerous denizens get together to throw down, but also like people party at Jabba's palace, right? So like have him there and have some ferns in the background. Like I have this pin that I got at Disneyland that's just like him and the whole crew, and they're all just like yucking it up, having a great time. And it's like, these guys, first of all, like some of these guys are kidnappers and drug dealers, but other people just go like, they're like, I'm going to this kidnapper's house for a sleepover.
it's like Scarface or whatever. Like they're just having big parties, having big Coke parties. Like it's such a funny character. It's so deeply problematic. And I love that people are like, Return of the Jedi is only for kids. And it's like, really? Because it opens with like a drug dealing human trafficker killing a woman by feeding her to an exotic pet. And then he gets strangled by a woman in a bikini who he was holding hostage. Like, it's pretty gnarly.
And they blow up his boat.
Yeah, they blow up his big Coke yacht. Like, it's what I love is like, it's so Jabba is problematic in universe. He's canonically a very difficult, not an unsavory character, but outside of the universe, he's managed to be controversial as well. Like there's the but the slave Leia bikini is a cultural touchstone that's a little bit odd, especially in this post-Disney Star Wars era, and they definitely have done their best to sort of phase that out. Back in 2013, there was a Jabba the Hutt Lego set, or Jabba's Palace Lego set, that sparked a huge controversy because somebody pointed out that it looks like a mosque because it's got a minaret, and it looks sort of like this 1,500-year-old mosque in Turkey.
Is that why that one's like so expensive?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that is
blew
nuts.
Up. The problem that I had with that set is that they broke it into two sets. They had basically the upstairs, and then they had the Rancor pit. And the upstairs came with like a whole bunch of minifigs. And I got that one back in 2013. But the Rancor pit, which cost about as much. And again, this was before Star Wars went fully. I think they had like the Ultimate Collector Series stuff, but they hadn't gone fully into like, here's a $400, Jabba the Hutt boat Lego set, whatever. The Rancor pit on its own was a set which came with the Rancor, and it came with the Gamorrean Guard, and it's the most boring set because it's basically just like a square with some little cage doors on it. It's like not a fun set to build. It's just like a box, and then if you had the other stuff, you put it on top, and then it looks cool. But it's just this weird kind of piecemeal way to do it. I think there was some controversy around the original Kenner playset because, again, like it's a toy that comes with a bong. Yeah, like it comes with a big hookah, which was not really, and a
choke chain.
Yeah, I think there was actually. Hold on, let me see if I can grab this. There it is. So I have a very weird bootleg toy. This is from an artist named Suckadelic, who does some very funny stuff, and it is a carded toy that says Star Bong, and it's got a picture of Greedo and Ponda Baba dressed like Cheech and Chong, and then Boba Fett dressed like Matthew McConaughey in Dazed and Confused, and then it's just got an extremely red-eyed Jabba the Hutt blowing smoke, and that's Snoop Dogg with Bib Fortuna's head tails. So it's got some funny Photoshop going on, but the thing that is included with the toy is just Jabba's bong. And I think the story here, so yeah, the back reads, in 1983, Kenner Toys released the Jabba the Hutt action figure playset as part of the Return of the Jedi action figure line. While on the surface, this toy seemed like any other plastic representation of an iconic space alien, it is in reality one of the most perverted toys ever made. Amongst the other accessories included in the set was a bong and a bondage leash. Apparently, there was no close study of this item, as hundreds of thousands of these sets were purchased by unwitting parents who had no clue they were encouraging degeneracy in their children by giving them replica S&M gear and plastic drug paraphernalia. Looking at this generation now as adults, one must conclude that it was clearly the corrupting influence of this toy that has caused their downfall, and someone must be held accountable. And these were, I don't even know how they tracked down this many accessories. They probably did reproductions, I guess. But like these accessories, weirdly enough, like finding the original Jabba, not that hard. The accessories are hard to get because kids would lose their bongs or whatever. But again, that just really highlights.
Got the little hookah tube handle on it, and you can stick it inside of Jabba's hand.
Yeah,
like it's really great. Like it's not great for kids to play with bongs, but you get the point. I mean, it was also 1983, and so
it's extremely funny that even made it in there. I love that. I've always felt that Boogie Nights has a sort of weird parallel to Star Wars. And I think people pointed that out too, but there's the part where they go to Alfred Molina's house.
Yeah.
And they try to rip off his coke. And I love that whole scene is kind of feels like Jabba's palace.
It does, yeah. I mean, that's I've always said that like the Jabba's palace sequence is a 20-something minute short film on its own about a bunch of people that try to steal wall art from a drug dealer, and like they go to Alfred Molina's house in Boogie Nights and they try to steal something from him, and he does that whole like charming, sleazy like come in, hang out, you know, and he's got people passed out, hanging out around the house and stuff like that. So it like it very much feels like that. It's a good scene, but I will say my second interaction with Jabba the Hutt, my second earliest memory with Jabba the Hutt is Pizza the Hutt from Spaceballs.
Oh yeah.
Yes, which was like, so that was one of those things where I was like, okay, Spaceballs came out. I had seen enough Star Wars by then to understand parody, and Pizza the Hutt came out, and his Bib Fortuna, his sidekick, was this robot that was kind of supposed to be, I forget who he's parodying, but he's mixed between like a Italian gangster and there was like this robot that was like on TV. Do you remember that guy's?
Max Headroom?
Yes. So he's like an Italian gangster meets Max Headroom, and he does this like weird VHS skip thing a lot. Like there's this jitter to him. He's got this electronic thing, and Pizza the Hutt is just disgusting. But I also remember being like, as a nerd who loved, you know, puppets and practical effects and creature design and stuff like that, I was like, wait a minute. I love pizza. I love Jabba the Hutt. How the hell did they make this character? This is so cool. Like he's dripping, and his buddy eats part of him at one point. Like I remember his mouth would open up and there was just melted cheese falling out of it.
Isn't there like the punchline is like Pizza the Hutt was found dead in his limousine after eating pieces of himself or something?
He ate himself to death. Yeah, he eats himself to death. Which I have like I found an artist on Etsy that did a painting of the two of those guys, and I have that in my living room. So I don't know what's wrong with me, why so many. I mean, I don't know. Like I remember growing up and people had like Precious Moments dolls in their house, or they would get like, you know, pewter figurines or whatever. Or they get those
like,
weird.
Well, those are pretty tacky anyway.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, we definitely have strange things in our house. It just occurred to me. I never made the Pizza the Hutt connection with you, but had they made Pizza the Hutt toys, that would be your entire personality.
I wish they made a Pizza the Hutt toy.
So the only reason they don't is that's how that movie got made. Is that Mel Brooks agreed that he would not do any merchandise for it.
Yeah.
And that was George Lucas's terms, and he was like, "Okay, go nuts, have fun."
I do have a button that I got at Star Wars Celebration that is shaped like a red and white Coke bottle cap, and it says Pizza the Hut on it in the Pizza Hut font, which is very, old threadless T-shirt pitch or whatever. But it's one of those things where I'm like, okay, they don't make a ton. Despite the fact that they say merchandising in that movie 60 times, you're right. There's not much Spaceballs merchandise, so I don't have a Pizza the Hut action figure, but I would love one.
I wonder if that someday that'll change, if we'll get like a limited run thing. I mean, there's bootleg toys out there, but it's I would totally get a Pizza the Hut toy. That would be a good one. Yeah. So my favorite bootleg Jabba the Hutt thing that I ever had was a million years ago. I don't know what I was poking around online, and I found an image from a one-shot Dark Horse comic that came out in, I think, 1997, where Jabba the Hutt just fucking eats a guy. Like, he just picks up a grown man and just eats him whole. And so I had this, and I found this image, and I just stared at it for a second, and I immediately opened up Redbubble, and I just dragged and dropped it in Photoshop, up the resolution, and just got this shirt printed that was just Jabba eating a dude, and it's got like a giant, sound effect that says like squelch or something.
You wore it in 2018 when we went to go see Solo together. And we went to pizza before we went to go see that movie, and you were wearing that shirt. And with us was Pablo Hidalgo, who's like one of the lead story guys at Lucasfilm. He's put out, written a bunch of the visual dictionaries and stuff that we own. And he immediately recognized the panel and it was just like, yeah, oh man, that's awesome. Like, this guy's an encyclopedia.
Yeah, Pablo literally wrote the book on all the weird bullshit in the background of Jabba's palace. Like, I didn't know that Jabba had a tribal tattoo until I looked at that little visual dictionary.
That's one of those things where it's like it's popped up on a couple of toys, and it's such a tacky tattoo. It's a tattoo that like your buddy you went to high school with who became a cop got in 2005.
Yeah. What's funny is people have definitely gotten that tattoo now. Like, it's in the same way I have, like, my first tattoo is one of the insignias on Boba Fett's armor. Not the cool one that has the skull, but the one that just looks like a Fender guitar logo with a leaf next to it or whatever. And like, I got it because I was like, I love Boba Fett and I want this to be esoteric. And in the years since then, it's become like very commonplace. And like, for a minute there, it was like it was impossible to find like anything with that on it aside from an action figure. And now it's like you can get purses and shit. The Jabba one, like, I didn't notice that forever, and now you play Star Wars Outlaws, and like Jabba's entire syndicate is represented by this tribal tattoo he gets, which the context for that tattoo has kind of been created around him. I
lost my shit playing Star Wars Outlaws and going into Jabba's palace and sneaking around. That whole mission was such a delight, and then going into his actual his throne room and just pausing it and popping into photo mode and just flying the camera all around and looking at all the corners, but also just like zooming in on him. I forget, I'm not remembering the name of it, but the character artist who designed that asset specifically did a bunch of other stuff for that game and put up like high-res renders of all like the characters he did from Return of the Jedi and and put in Star Wars Outlaws, and they're just so cool. It's just, I don't know, it is an incredible creature design. Yeah. Right? Like,
it's outside
outside of all the puppeteering and everything, just the texture on him is just so cool. And
he's one of the ones that really could have gone a lot of different directions. Like, the concept art for Jabba is like all over the place. Yeah. And the earliest ones like was much more clearly the caterpillar from Alice in Wonderland. Like,
he's a lot more arms and legs, and he's like white and beige and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And, he's, like, smoking
there's one that's like just really scary. It's like a Ralph McQuarrie one and it's like more humanoid, but he's just got like, I feel like he looks more like Droopy McCool, but with like sharper features. I don't know. I love that all came together the way it did, and it's such a fascinating little corner of Star Wars that really just doesn't. Again, you look at Star Wars, and there's a lot of cool stuff in there. There's a lot of stuff to get excited about, but Jabba is just such a bizarre intersection of like, here's this thing that is extremely toyetic, but also has bondage gear and a bomb. Here's this thing that is like from what's considered one of the most kid-friendly, infantilized corners of the Star Wars trilogy. But it's also about a drug lord getting strangled by by a prisoner. Like, it's really, he's just killing people in weird ways. He's feeding them dinosaurs. He's throwing them in the whatever the fuck the Sarlacc pit is. I mean, that's gnarly. That's but again, and he's scary and he's gross, but he's also funny and he's also oddly charismatic. Also, apparently canonically, he's supposed to be sexy for a Hutt.
Oh, really?
Like, by Hutt beauty standards, he's like a hot dude.
I mean, I was really excited when they brought in live action Hutts for the first time ever since Return of the Jedi in Book of Boba Fett. There's just like 2 of them that come out, and they're like a husband and wife or brother and sister, whatever. I'm sure that's the same thing in their world. I never really thought about this, but when Jabba the Hutt gets strangled by Leia and then his boat explodes, I bet you like most of that shit fell into the Sarlacc pit's mouth, and he was like, "What the fuck is that? Like, what the fuck did you just fed me this like 900-pound burnt frog that probably choked itself, got choked so hard it like, it shit itself."
Okay, so serious question: do you think the Sarlacc pit got high from all the people from Jabba's Coke boat that he ate?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he was probably high for a he ate, that thing eats slow too, right? It takes hundreds of years or whatever.
Edibles take forever to kick in.
Yeah. I mean, he was probably like, "What, you fucking threw all this shit in my mouth?" Like, I'm used to eating like a couple of guys here and there. Maybe like a bantha falls in, there's hair stuck in my teeth. A crate dragon every now and then gets his tail stuck in there, and he's like, blah, blah, blah. But for the most part, he's like, you just dropped fucking 60 guys in a boat.
Yeah, no, that's like a cocaine bear situation.
Yeah,
like that's not good for him.
They don't. They never show that scene. Like they're in Jabba's palace, and then the Rancor dies, and then there's like a wipe. And then they're on the boat, right? But they never show the part where he's like, "All right, guys, we're going out on the boat. Get all the fucking cocaine, get all the shit, get that fucking keyboardist, get that woman with the microphone with the big lips. Get her out there. Put them all on the boat. We're gonna get fucking high as hell. We're gonna throw a bunch of men in that hole out there."
I'm just thinking of like any excursion I've been on, like going on vacation and somebody books like a boat tour or like a bus or whatever. Like when you got to corral that many people, that's with like people who are, organized individuals. What was that coordination like? That was probably Gibbs doing, right? Like he was probably like, "All right, everybody, Jabba wants to go in the boat and feed people to the pit in the sand."
Like, yeah, what if like Jeff Bezos, Scarface, and Donald Trump were all the same guy, and they knew exactly where a shark was?
That's fucking bizarre.
And they're like, let's sail out to the middle of the sea. We're just gonna throw shit in the shark's mouth for a couple hours. I mean,
that was probably a really fun day before the boat exploded. That was probably like a pretty good time.
Did we ever shoot the thing? You and me pitched a sketch once. Well, we did a series, very short-lived, called Two Dumb Jedi. And I think one of them was just us, like, and I don't think we made this one, but it was us talking about like basically having a bonfire next to a Sarlacc pit and just like throwing lawn chairs and shit in there and like street signs, just anything we could find, like an old bookshelf, just put it there. And he's just, after a while, he's like, "Guys, what the fuck are you doing? Feed me a man or two. Like, what, you put a car in here?"
Yeah, like if teenagers found the Sarlacc pit, it would just be like full of like Natty Ice cans. There'd be so much shit in there. I love that. But yeah, the Sarlacc pit, that's a thing for another day. Jabba the Hutt, real piece of shit. Oh, you know his full name?
Oh, I forget this. What is it again?
It's Jabba Desalik Tiure.
Oh, that's right.
Everyone calls him Jabba the Hutt, but it's like, yeah, I mean, it's up there with like Sheev Palpatine.
Yeah.
Or that like predators are called Yautja. Like I love that they have to make it. They're like, "Oh, this guy, yeah, you can't. Your name can't be like first name Jabba, middle name the, last name Hutt. Like it doesn't work like that."
Jabba.
Also, I love like Jabba the Hutt. Yeah, no shit, he's a Hutt. Like what? Like I don't know. Yeah, Brian the Human.
I mean, there was that thing for a while where, and like I put this on social media years ago, and like there was a thing that like Mark Hamill saw, but it was my kid saying all the different Star Wars characters when she was 2, and she was saying all of them wrong, and she called Jabba Dadba, and so for a while we were like, "Oh, that's Dad Bod,"
Oh my God.
And like it just became this running joke where it's just like, I had a couple beers during the pandemic and got a little bit of a gut, and I'm like, "Oh, there's Dad Bod the Hutt right there."
I love it.
Yeah, but it's cool that we raise kids that understand who Ponda Baba and Jabba the Hutt are, and hopefully will turn out okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to do just fine. I think they're going to have a totally normal life, and I'm glad that we have each other in each other's lives to normalize having a bunch of Coke Lord Slugmen collectibles.
And
weird thing to have.
Next time your kid comes over and she needs to use the potty, and
yeah,
she needs some reading material, she can just look up and see a drawing of a 1983 slug choking
Yeah.
a robot.
You know, inside us there are 2 wolves, and inside Jabba the Hutt there are 5 guys. So, good time.
Oh, wait, hold up. One more thing. Before we go, just a very friendly reminder / desperate plea for all of our listeners to support the show however you can.
Each and every single like, share, subscribe, rating, review, follow, favorite, bookmark, upvote, and comment we receive helps us grow our audience.
Even a good up dog helps us out.
Every single little tidbit of organic interaction we get helps convince those cold, unfeeling algorithms that this show is actually worth anyone's time.
Good old-fashioned word of mouth works too, so if you think this show rules, tell people about it. Tell your friends.
Friends, lovers, strangers, enemies, whoever.
And of course, we might have mentioned kicking us $1 or $2 on Patreon is huge. Also has some really cool perks.
For instance, $1 a month gets access to bonus content. $5 gets you each week's episode on Tuesdays instead of Fridays.
And for a few dollars more, you can help decide the good, bad, and ugly topics for future episodes.
Head to patreon.com/thisthingrules to see for yourself. However you support the show, even if it's just making time to listen to us talk about our favorite stuff, you rule, and we love you for it. We'll see you next week. Or we'll hear you next week. Or you hear us.
You'll hear
We'll
us.
We'll talk to you later.
Next week.
And last but not least, a big, huge special thanks to our Patreon executive producers for helping keep the lights on. Brennan Bova, Ben Burkhalter, Kevin Lemasurier, Steve Cam, Donald Cole, Billy McKendry, Chip Chunkling, Scott Davis, and Go-Go Jason Waterfalls. You are all fantastic. You rule. Thank you.
The alien who is green, and he's a slug, and he is Jabba the Hutt.